My name is Alina, a 23-year-old college senior aiming to be a journalist. Today, instead of celebrating graduation, I'm trapped in a nightmare. Barely 24 hours since we buried my dad, Martin. He made me feel loved despite being halfway across the world. The house feels emptier without him. Standing numb in the foyer, my mother Claudia and sister Victoria announce plans. The words ring like a funeral knell, destroying any sense of family unity. "We're going to sell this house," Claudia says with a cold glint. I can't believe it. They're already thinking about money, betraying the loss of my dad. Victoria taunts, questioning my entitlement. Their greed and obsession with wealth mock me. "You're the worst." I cry out, unable to contain my anger. I'm done with them. The bell rings, interrupting. Wiping angry tears, I open the door to a stranger in a dark suit. "My condolences. May I come in?" he says solemnly. I let him in, wondering about the impact on our broken family. The echoes of my father's laughter are replaced by memories of hurtful words and emptiness. Sitting at the dining table, I struggle to focus. Dad's passing left a void, and their plan to sell our home cements the destruction of our family bonds. They seem so eager to chase their fantasies of luxury condos and designer lives that nothing else matters. Dad had been our anchor, and I'd expected at least a pretensive unity after he was gone. But now, faced with their naked opportunism, the lie of family was exposed, and something inside me snapped. Tired of being the outsider, the one who cared, I was ready to walk away from it all. Adrift in these thoughts, the doorbell rings, a sound I now associate with disruption and unwelcome news. At the door stands a man from my father's past, someone whose connections to our family had faded over time. "Good evening," he greets me. "I need to speak with you about your father's affairs." His solemn tone carries a formality that seems out of place in our disheveled living room, now a stark reminder of our discordant family. I nod, gesturing for him to sit down. Claudia and Victoria peek from the kitchen, their curious faces pinched with irritation. The man pulls out a stack of papers from his briefcase, his expression grim. "I'm Mr. Adams, your father's attorney. He entrusted me with his will and some final instructions," he explains as he adjusts his glasses, preparing to deliver news that feels poised to shake the foundation of our already crumbling household. Claudia leans in, her interest piqued. Victoria tries to look uninterested yet hovers close by. As Mr. Adams begins to speak, I brace myself for what's to come, unsure of the consequences, but certain that our family dynamics are about to change once again. The room seems to contract with tension as Mr. Adams clears his throat, unfolding the document that held the final wishes of Martin, my father. Claudia and Victoria perch on the edge of their seats, their eyes betraying a keenness they'd struggled to mask since we lost him. "In accordance with your father's requests, Mr. Adams starts, I am here to read the will and begin the process of executing his instructions." He looks around at each of us, perhaps gauging our readiness for what he's about to divulge. I can't help but feel a sense of dread. Growing up in the shadow of my mother and sister's expectations had taught me to expect little, to brace for disappointment. Yet, as the attorney's words begin to flow, it's evident that our expectations are about to be overturned. "To my daughter Alina, I leave the entirety of my estate, including the family home and all accumulated savings and investments." The room falls silent but for the rustling of paper and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. Mr. Adams continues to read, but I barely register his words. All I can hear is the thundering beat of my heart and a kind of ringing in my ears. It can't be right. There must be some mistake. I finally managed to stammer, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "But why?" Victoria's chair scrapes violently against the floor as she stands, her eyes widening in a mix of shock and fury. Claudia, similarly stunned, remains seated, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. JN, who had until now hovered quietly in the background, steps forward as if to protect or perhaps restrain Victoria. "This is some kind of joke, right?" He demands, but Mr. Adams simply offers a somber shake of his head. There's no error, he assures us. Martin was very specific in his directive. He believed that Alina, with her convictions and work ethic, would best honor his legacy and manage his assets responsibly. Claudia finds her voice as disbelief gives way to anger. But what of us? She snaps, her voice rising. Her mother and sister. Are we to be left with nothing while she takes everything? The question hangs in the air, a palpable cloud of resentment radiating from my mother and sister. I'm at a loss for words, torn between the immense responsibility thrust upon me and the sting of their evident greed. Mr. Adams meets my gaze. Martin had his reasons, which he believed would be understood in time. We must discuss the next steps and the details of the estate. As he talks, I can't help but wonder what my father saw in me, what faith he had placed in my hands, and how I could ever help to fulfill it amidst the ruins of our family unity. The silence after Mr. Adams's revelation feels almost as heavy as the sadness that gripped me during my father's funeral. Claudia and Victoria's outrage fills the room, crashing against my shock like waves against a cliff. For a moment, no one speaks. We're trapped in a standstill, the implications of my father's will cutting through the air like a cold wind. My reasons, Mr. Adams finally continues, looking directly at me, were detailed in a personal letter left to me by your father for you, Alina. I'm to give it to you after the reading of the will. Victoria's voice breaks the spell. But there must be some mistake. I mean, she can't just get everything. Her words ricochet off the walls, heralding a battle I have no desire to fight. Jan puts a restraining hand on her shoulder, but it does nothing to dampen her spirit. And what about us? What are we, strangers he decided to discard after everything we've done for him? She seizes upon the words like a weapon, her voice rising to a crescendo of disbelief. Claudia's mask of shock peels away, revealing the anger beneath. Exactly. There must be some provision for this, some oversight or option for dispute. This is preposterous. Her hands grip the arms of her chair, knuckles whitening. I finally find my voice, feeble though it sounds even to my ears. I don't understand. Why would Dad do this? What was he thinking? My mind races with unanswered questions, all pointing to a man I realize I may never have truly known. Mr. Adams removes his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose before responding. Martin had his reasons, and he wanted you to know them, but in his own words. As for Claudia and Victoria, he turns to address them. You may contest the will if you wish, but Martin's instructions were explicit, and his sound mind when drafting it is well documented. The room falls into chaos once more. Voices clash as Claudia and Victoria express their anger and confusion, scrambling for a plan of action. I barely hear them. My thoughts are with the unopened letter, a final message from my father that burns a hole in the table where it lies. Taking a deep breath, I reach for the letter. The paper feels both insubstantial and as heavy as lead in my hands. Unfolding the creases, I prepare to read the words of a man who chose to speak from beyond the grave rather than in life, an inheritance that feels more like a chalice of poison than a cup of blessings. Alone in my room with the door securely closed, I unfold the letter with trembling hands. Each crease seems to hold a whisper of my father's voice. As the written words appear, I brace myself for the understanding that was about to come. Dearest Alina, it began in my father's familiar script. As you read this, I am sorry. Sorry that I am not there to tell you these things in person. Sorry that I am leaving you with a burden that a parent should never bestow on their child. His apology, sincere and immediate, cut through the complexities of legal jargon and blunt revelations that had filled the air just moments ago. I inhaled deeply, the scent of ink on paper somewhat comforting. Your strength, your discipline, and your vision for a better world have never been invisible to me. In you, I saw the promise of a future that embraced honesty and integrity, far from the grasping hands of greed. The letter trembled in my hands, not from a breeze through the old window pane, but from the wellspring of emotions it unleashed. My eyes continued down the page. Elena, I've not been blind to the ways of our household. Your patience and hard work in the face of neglect by your mother and sister have been both my heartache and my pride. Giving you the entirety of my estate is my way of reconciling with the unfair responsibilities you've been forced to shoulder. Each sentence wove a tapestry of my father's unspoken observations and quiet support. The man who seemed a distant provider had been watching all along, understanding more than he let on. My only hope is that this inheritance will provide the freedom and the means for you to fulfill those aspirations that burn so brightly within you, to not feel confined to fix what was broken long before you could make a difference. Live the life you deserve, my Elena. I folded the letter, pressing it against my chest, feeling the uncatched love of a father who had seen his daughter's unassuming sacrifices. A wave of determination swept through me, mixed with the grief that had trailed me like a shadow since his passing. Leaving the safety of my room, I stepped back into the storm that was my fractured family. Mr. Adams glanced up as I entered, a silent question in his gaze. Claudia's glare was sharp and fixated on me, and Victoria was pacing like a caged animal. Her earlier rage turned desperate. It's time to talk about what happens next, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Claudia scoffed. What happens next is that we challenge this farce. Victoria nodded vehemently. You won't get away with this, Elena. Mr. Adams interjected, any legal challenge will be a lengthy and costly process with no guaranteed outcome. Martin's will is clear and well within his rights to enforce. With my father's words burning a hole in my pocket, I faced them, the family that had never truly been a family. It wasn't my decision, but it was his, and I intend to honor it. Tension wrapped chains around us all, but amid the chaos, one truth held steadfast. I would carry out my duty, uphold my father's wishes, and through them, perhaps, find my own path to a better world. In the following days, the house became a war zone of oppressively silent moments and thunderous arguments. Claudia and Victoria scoured legal forums and consulted with lawyers, desperately seeking a loophole to contest the will. They clung to the belief that they were entitled to Martin's legacy, viewing it as their rightful due rather than the gift of a man's life's work. Despite their efforts, Mr. Adams remained unflappable, a steady pillar amid the tempest. His calm demeanor was a source of comfort as we navigated the uncharted waters of estate settlement. The will is airtight, Elena, he assured me once again over cups of tepid coffee in the formal dining room. You need not worry about their threats. Yet, even with his reassurances, guilt gnawed at me. Was it right to accept everything while my mother and sister got nothing? The logical part of my brain reminded me that my father had his reasons, but my heart couldn't shake the residual familial obligation, a desire to mend what was broken even when I knew it was beyond repair. I spent my days preparing for the inevitable legal challenges and familiarizing myself with Martin's finances. The responsibility was daunting, running the numbers, making decisions about property and investments I never knew existed. Each step felt like wading through fog, but I was determined to see it through, to build on the small beacon of trust my father had left me. It was during these sessions of poring over financial statements that my mind would wander to the life waiting beyond these walls, how to use this inheritance to forge a path aligned with my own values, how I could make a lasting impact. Amid the chaos, Claudia and Victoria grew increasingly agitated, their true colors seeping out in bursts of pettiness and spite. In an impulsive display, Victoria claimed sentimental family heirlooms, while Claudia hinted at dark secrets that could tarnish Martin's name. Their insinuations aimed to wound, to shake my resolve. But I had become adept at navigating their emotional minefields. One particularly tense evening, the air thick with inset threats and frigid stares, I reached my breaking point. Enough, I said, the single word slicing through the tension. 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me, uncertain, wary. I can't give you what Dad didn't leave for you, but what I can do is help you start over somewhere else. Their shock was palpable, an abrupt shift in the dynamic they had been fueling. It won't be a life of luxury, but it will be a fresh start. Claudia's laughter was sharp, humorless. A concession prize from our dearest Elena. How magnanimous! Her sarcasm was a familiar sting, but it glanced off the armor years of antagonism had helped me forge. I stood firm despite the bitterness that clouded the air between us. It's not a prize, it's a choice. Take it or leave it, but understand this. I am moving forward, with or without your acceptance. Their response was a symphony of silence and grudging nods, a tenuous agreement forged at the crossroads of greed and survival. As I retreated to my room, the letter's weight in my pocket reminded me of the journey ahead, one where I'd navigate not only the inheritance, but also who I would become as a consequence of it. The days turned into weeks as my life became a routine of meetings with Mr. Adams and navigating the complex process of realizing my inheritance. Claudia and Victoria, having reluctantly accepted my offer, began their search for a more modest place to call home. The atmosphere grew less contentious, though the air still held a chill that went beyond the coming of winter. It was a time of paradoxical solitude. Amidst the chaos, the house felt larger and more desolate with each packed box and removed piece of furniture. I found temporary solace in my father's study, which remained untouched, a capsule of the past that echoed with a time when family strife was just a faint undercurrent beneath the surface of our daily lives. The day finally came when Claudia and Victoria left the house for the last time. With the signing of a check and a curt farewell, they were gone, taking with them remnants of a life that was forever changed. Standing in the doorway, I watched as their car disappeared around the bend, feeling an unsettling mixture of relief and sorrow. It was time to look to the future. With Mr. Adams' help, I set up a charitable foundation in my father's name dedicated to fostering educational opportunities for young underprivileged students like the younger version of myself, who once believed her dreams were unattainable within the confines of a home that didn't understand her aspirations. I enrolled in graduate school, pursuing a program in journalism that would put me on the path to the career I'd always envisioned. As I worked towards my master's degree, I used the network my father had left behind, along with the resources now at my disposal, to intern at a prominent newspaper. My life was busier than I ever imagined, filled with the pursuit of stories and justice, just like I discussed with my father on those long-distance calls that now felt like a lifetime ago. These days, I'm always on the go, carrying with me the principles that he instilled in me. The house, once a cage of sorts, began to feel more like a home as I made it my own. I repainted walls, rearranged furniture, and even adopted a rescue dog, a joyful presence that filled the emptiness with barks and boundless energy. The rooms that had once witnessed family feuds now opened up to friends, colleagues, and laughter. Sometimes I'd find myself in my father's study, poring over his old letters and the faded pages of his books. My eyes would linger on the signature at the bottom of his letter, the final message that had altered the course of my life. Duty and love, he wrote, are the strongest forces we wield. Use them well. And in those quiet moments, surrounded by the legacy of words and wisdom that my father left behind, I'd whisper a promise to do just that.